Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table, because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today I am joined by another worthy warrior, Holly Murray. Holly is a certified conversion copywriter with a passion for helping entrepreneurs bring their big ideas to life through strategy and impactful messaging. With a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, certifications in life coaching and copywriting, and years of experience as a counselor, ministry leader, and right-hand woman, she has built a career rooted in connection and service. Her entrepreneurial journey is one of resilience, determination, and faith. Holly balances her thriving business with her most important roles as a wife and mom, demonstrating daily how to pursue purpose and passion while keeping family at the heart of it all. Known for her warm personality and ability to see the potential in every idea, she partners with mission-driven leaders to make a difference in their businesses and beyond. In this episode of Created Worthy, Holly is going to share her story of navigating motherhood and entrepreneurship, as well as the lessons she's learned about trusting the process throughout the course of her life, and how now she empowers others to show up authentically both in life and business. I know that her story is going to encourage anyone seeking to turn their dreams into a reality while staying grounded in their faith and family. Holly, thank you so much for joining me on the Created Worthy podcast. This has been a long time coming. Oh. We have known each other we first met like over 15 years ago, which is
that long ago?
So crazy.
Wow.
I know. Well, I'm bad at math. Is that 15?
Well, I am not the mathematician either, but this is 2025.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Over 10, less than 20. There we go.
Somewhere in those numbers. But yeah, it's been a long time. And over the last year, we've been able to work so much together on so many client projects, on DDCC things. And you are also a huge part of Heart Soul Strength.
Yes. I get to sit on the board, which is such an honor.
Yes. And we are headed to Virginia actually next week for our very first board meeting.
I need a trip. I need a solo trip.
You need a trip.
So it'll be a girls trip.
It's definitely a girls trip. It's a business trip.
It's a trip where I can just be me, not have the mom role and the wife role.
Is this your first trip like that?
Well, no, I went to Waco.
You went to Waco. Duh. She was also one of the Waco women.
And I got to go like when Carson was pretty young, my son, I went to Arizona like for a work trip. So
okay. A couple.
But it's time.
It's time. I feel you. We're actually here in person in Houston, which I think we're watching history go down in the making while we're sitting in this incredible, beautiful podcast studio, which actually, before we jump into your story, I feel like we should just talk a little bit about where we're at, set the scene.
Yes, we have to.
But there's also like a potentially historical storm.
It's like Snowmageddon, which is insane to say for Houston, Texas. So I read one meteorologist talked about the largest, in recent-ish history was like 1960. And then I think maybe we're rivaling something in the 1980s. But the reports are all over the place. Earlier, like end of last week, early this week, they were saying 1 or 2 inches, which is still something significant for Houston, Texas. But now, my weather app has consistently said 5 or 6 inches, 7 or 8 inches. It's all over the place. And it's going to be different bands of it. But something that the listener may not understand or get, because if they live up north, they're probably like, okay, come on. Like, that's just a regular Tuesday, right? But in Houston, we have no infrastructure for this whatsoever. No snowplows, zero. There are zero snowplows. I can guarantee you the only Houstonians who own a snow shovel would be if they like moved here from Wisconsin or something. And we don't have the preparation, like the brining trucks or the salt trucks or whatever.
Do you think we're going to see anyone trying to shovel the snow with like a dirt shovel? Hi, post-storm Danielle cutting in here just to say that we did in fact see a Houstonian shoveling snow with a dirt shovel.
One thing about Houstonians is they're resilient and they're problem solvers because of all the hurricanes and things. Like, a Texas girl or guy is going to survive. So we'll see all kinds of unique things.
I'm down. I'm actually, I told you before we got here. So my husband and I are here because it's Spiritual Emphasis Week and there's a conference at the end of the week. But yeah, before we got here, I was like, I'm so down. I'm so ready to see some history go down in Houston.
And it's going to be really fun because I have a 4-year-old. So we're going to get to see it through the eyes of a 4-year-old. And I know snow is much more common for you guys in the Denver area, but this will be my son's first time to ever see snow. I mean, I think we saw it when we came to Colorado in September. I think we saw it on like a mountaintop. Yeah. He's never experienced snow. This has been a wish and a dream and a desire of his heart. And I've been telling him, we will take you to see snow. But now I just get to take him to the backyard.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited. I'm going to be taking videos. So one more thing to set the scene. We are in the fulfillment of somebody's dream who means a lot to you and someone who I've met earlier this year. And I got to hear about the dream before it came to fruition. And we're using like actual podcasting room setup mics. If you're on YouTube, you actually get to see us. Hi.
It's gorgeous here.
It's
Is it not?
So beautiful. Oh my goodness. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about the process of how this space came to be, because I feel like that's a miracle in and of itself.
Oh, it so is. So the founder of this place, her name is Robin Lounsbury. Shout out to Robin if you're listening, when you listen. And her co-working space is called Her Facility. And it's located in Mont Belvieu, Texas, which is, 20-something miles outside of Houston proper. And if you're anywhere on this side of Houston, or even if you're just in Houston, drive out here, rent a car. It's worth it. Drive out here. She has a gorgeous co-working space, like common area. She has hot desks. She has private offices. And then she also has room for hosting events. You can rent out the entire place to have like a baby shower, a bridal shower, whatever, a work event, work conference. And then, of course, this podcasting studio. Yeah. And cool thing is, Danielle and I, this is the inaugural use of this room. Yes. So we get to, like, we're rounding out season 5 on Danielle's podcast. She's going to have a solo episode too to like celebrate hitting a milestone. But yeah, this is our first time here. And this is, Robin's first time to have a founding member. I'm a founding member of this place to use the podcast studio. And what better way to do it than with Danielle? So I'm honored and excited. And additionally, Robin has had this dream in her heart for years. She formerly owned a bridal gallery, a bridal shop in Houston, Texas, and has been an entrepreneur for probably close to 2 decades at this point. And this is a new venture for her, but it's not a new thought or idea. This seed has been in her heart and mind for a few years. It was a matter of, wouldn't that be great? And a hope and a dream that turned into prayer, that turned into prayer with legs on it, taking steps of faith and steps of action. Yeah. And here we are. And when I walked in the door, I said, we are standing in the promises of God. I mean, This is a physical representation of years of prayer and preparation to get to this point. And now so many women in this community are going to get to enjoy the fruit of Robin's labor.
It's so beautiful. Like, it is. From the green, perfect shade of green painted doors to like just everything. The beauty is like all the way to the details.
Yeah. Look at this water cup.
Yeah.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Go to YouTube and watch the video just so you can see the water cup. And okay, coffee cup. Look at this coffee cup and this little stir stick with her logo on it. Are you kidding me? So cute.
It's precious. Every detail was thought of.
Yeah, so good. It feels like such an honor to be able to break in this podcast studio, and like even the story of how she got this equipment.
Yes.
It was literally a gift to her. I walked in, I was like, this is really nice equipment. Like way nicer than what I have at home. We're going to figure this out.
Right. And no laundry piles. You and I both deal
piles.
with, being a mom, you have lots of interesting stuff in your office all the time.
So yes, we are super grateful for Robin and to be able to use her facility here in Houston. Well, in Mont Bellevue. There we go. Okay. So now I definitely want to jump into your story though, because your story has inspired me so much. And I've been able to hear chunks of it throughout, obviously, the year. But Created Worthy is so special because we get to talk about like how we became who we currently are by talking about our testimony and what we've gone through and the things that have helped to shape that resilience and to just like build that muscle to be that woman that God has created us to be. So take us back to the beginning of your life. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what life was like for you, and paint us a picture of your childhood.
Okay, I will. So I was born here in Houston, Texas, and I joke and say it was a snowy winter day because we literally rarely, if ever, have snow in Houston. But now that's kind of ironic. The joke doesn't land today because we are getting snow in Houston. But I was born in December, very close to Christmas. And my little claim to fame is that I got to come home on Christmas Day in a stocking made by the nursing staff for all the Christmas babies. So that special little detail really does lend itself to the fact that I was super blessed to have an amazing childhood and to have very loving, amazing parents. I was very much so wanted. It's myself and my brother, and we were very planned for, desired for, hoped for, prayed for, and wanted. My parents unfortunately struggled with infertility. They did not have, this is like, we'll get into that later, but my mom did pass away when I was a teenager. So some of this is like based on my memories of conversations with her while I was growing up. But they got pregnant easily, but staying pregnant was an issue. And so they had lost children through miscarriage, and then they lost a child through stillbirth. So that really shaped,
Before you?
Before me. My sister is named Lauren. And Lauren was born born sleeping, as they say. And she was born sleeping a couple of years before me. As a woman now, I would have so many questions for my mom of like, what is that like? Like having a pregnancy and a healthy pregnancy, albeit high risk, because my mom was considered high risk after all the losses, but particularly the loss of Lauren. So I would love to hear from a woman's perspective what that was like, because I'm sure just from what I've heard from other women, sometimes it's hard to attach during the pregnancy or there's fear or whatever. But whatever the case may be of that, once I was here, it was really exciting for them. And they named me Holly based upon being born in December. So they kind of like went with the theme. Plus it was the 80s, so Holly was a popular name. Like I had a great childhood, and my brother came along 21 months later. So they kind of like, not quite Irish twins, but we're pretty close in age. We just did the family thing, like suburban Texas life. We had a little house in a neighborhood. This community has grown so much. I grew up out here in Mont Bellevue, Texas. And when I was here growing up, it was a much smaller area. I was driving Danielle and her husband Gary around yesterday and telling them about all the growth here. It's really developed. We're pretty much like another loop around Houston now.
Which, by the way, I just have to say this because I thought it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Middle school, elementary school, primary school, intermediate school, never heard of that. Middle school and high school are all on one giant property.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, first of all, what is intermediate school? Second of all, North Middle School and South Middle School are right next to each other. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is this?
So I will say that they had a vision for this community,
Yeah.
and they desired for the schools to stay very central. So the main drag through the city is called Eagle Drive, because the school, it's the Eagles, Barbers Hill Eagles. So the town is Mont Bellevue. The school district is Barbers Hill. So they wanted Eagle Drive to be the hub and the center. And so they had forethought, because if you knew, when I grew up here, it was like one stoplight. I mean,
Right.
It was not what it is today. Today we have an HEB. If you're from Texas, you know. If you know, you know. We have all kinds of stuff here, Starbucks, like all, on and on. So they really thought ahead, because they pre-purchased the property to be able to build all of that out. So yeah, everything's here in that center, and that's how I grew up, was just small town Texas. Friday night lights to some extent, you know, but yeah, it was a very close-knit community. I still have friends. My best friend I met in a Mother's Day Out program, and she's still my best friend to this day, Annie. And I have girlfriends that we got to meet at church last night that I've gone from either Mother's Day Out through senior year, through adult, young adulthood till now, or kindergarten. And that's very rare to be able to be an adult and still have friends that you're connected with.
Yeah.
So it was really good. Now, I will say there were challenges, but not necessarily within my household. And we weren't a perfect family. I mean, we had our fights, we had our things. My dad is an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. My grandparents are entrepreneurs. My dad's grandparents were entrepreneurs. So if you know anything about entrepreneurship, it's messy. My dad worked a lot. He at one point had 2 companies. So my mom was holding down the fort. She was a stay-at-home mom for the majority of my life. But there was a time in my very young childhood where I was in a daycare setting. And in that daycare setting, unfortunately, I was one of several children who were abused. And that was a major case, a major court case. They actually convicted the person or persons responsible for that. And that was super impactful on me, because I had a nurturing family, and I had a family that cared. And even from the age, we had to go through court proceedings. I didn't actually end up having to testify. I was the youngest victim. I was around 2, maybe a little earlier than that. Wow. And I was pre-verbal. So it wasn't like I don't know if I had words, or if maybe I had words but wasn't communicating. I'm not clear, because these are questions that, as a young teenager, my mom had passed when I was 19. So I asked questions and knew things, but I didn't, now I'd be like an investigative journalist, right? As an adult, you ask different questions. But anyway, that situation was unfortunate. But through that, my journey began of this marriage between mental health and faith, I would say, because at an early age, I began engaging with mental health professionals, like a play therapist when I was young, in preparation for potentially going to court, and then also testimony purposes and all of that. Yeah. And then also at a very young age, I got saved. So I went to a vacation Bible school here at a local church. A high school girl, I'm assuming she was high school or college age, became my favorite person that week, because I always found a safe person, right? Because if you were abused in a daycare setting, then it's pretty scary to go into a new situation, particularly where your mom is dropping you off, So I found her and bonded with her, and she explained the gospel to me at my little 4-year-old level, and I accepted Jesus in my heart at that young age. And so even though the enemy came at me hard and came at me young, God already had a plan and already had people in place. And so I hope that even encourages moms where, maybe they have teenager kids, or maybe them as a teenager, they volunteered. You never know, that. Right. That young lady probably doesn't know the impact. I mean, she's thinking it was just popsicle sticks and glue, Elmer's glue, right. But it was salvation, for me.
Wow. So you were super young when that happened, but God still provided. He still showed up very young to show you that he was a good good father and
Yes.
that you were still protected and you were still seen and chosen.
Yes.
So obviously we wish that would have never happened. I hate sin. Oh my gosh. And to think of just what you had to go through so young. Obviously you didn't understand at that time, but as a mom now, looking back, how has that process been for you in healing from the trauma that you experienced, specifically in the most recent years since becoming a mom and seeing and protecting your son? Has there been any kind of additional healing that you've had to go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I was fortunate enough to have family who cared. So I did experience, I think, good levels and good amounts of healing as a young person and a young adult, even because I wasn't afraid to go get a counselor. And like I've joked and said I've like paid enough for therapy that I've sent people's kids to college and stuff, you know. But all that being said, for me at least, and I've heard other people describe this too, when you become a parent, you understand the love of God at like this whole new level. And granted, like my parents were loving. My dad still is loving. My stepmom is amazing and loving. You know, my mom still loves me even though she's not here. But that being said, like there was that gap of, you know, they stepped away and something bad happened, right? So for me, becoming a mother and experiencing the love of God at such a tangible level and knowing that that's just a drop in the bucket for what God feels for me, it really does combat any shame that would try to remain, or any time that you're fearful or doubting. Like it really helps you to recenter and become more grounded on knowing the truth.
Right.
Also, I would say shout out to former counselors. I had a counselor that prepped me, like this was before I was even married, and she had told me, which could initially sound a little depressing, but I found hope in it. She said at every age and every stage, you're going to have to reconfront the sexual abuse.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, you know, processing, like Siri, recalculating, because I needed to sit on that for a minute. But she was so right, because every time you're stepping into something new, and it's not a matter of like secondary trauma or being re-traumatized. It's just a matter of everybody has those lenses on their life. Sometimes we call them rose-colored glasses, but it can be trauma-colored glasses, or, you know, hopefully it becomes trauma-informed glasses.
Yeah.
But just knowing like kind of what you're getting into. And so she at that time was like, look, when your child hits 2 years old, or when your child is going into any form of childcare, anything, you may have some struggles. And so whenever I did hit that stage in motherhood, it normalized it for me of like, it's okay to have these questions. Or like, if I have thoughts, the other day I was having some quote unquote crazy thoughts, and it was revolving around my son, because protecting him is extremely important to me. I think it's important to any parent, but unfortunately I have firsthand knowledge of how people can have terrible actions.
Yeah.
So when I had those thoughts the other day, I was able to acknowledge them and say, okay, these are my thoughts and these are real. And then really like talk myself off the ledge. So I think the healing that came through motherhood was, like I said, receiving the love of God to a whole new level, but then also giving myself permission to process, like go. I feel like a lot of my journey, like we talked about in the bio, has been a process.
Yeah.
And if I've had suddenlies, because I like to joke and say suddenlies are often a really long time coming. Mm-hmm. So walking it out and being able to see like, God's got me, God's got this, God has my child, like everything's going to be okay. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end of the story.
Yeah.
It's that messy middle.
For sure, which you've had a lot of messy middles in your life. So let's talk about going into your teenage years. What was high school teenage years like for you?
So I would say high school teenage years were pretty good. I mean, they're awkward for anyone. You're growing and developing and finding your own way. But because I had that foundation of faith and a foundation of a loving family, it really helped me. And I would say I was really confident in myself at a young age, which I think is unusual. Back in middle school, I like we had this thing in Texas called UIL, which was like a competition based thing where you could do, like my husband did maps, charts, and graphs. You could do like creative writing. You could do all these different things, singing. And it was all like part of school. Like you could join these different teams or whatever. And I actually joined impromptu speaking. And I think that was kind of some foreshadowing of what was to come in my life. But yeah, I carried confidence. And I guess also I just learned how to do it scared, because I can be and have in the past been more of a timid person. Just that fear, I think, of based upon the things that I went through, right? As like a super young child. We were just last night listening to how our nervous systems and our brain and how neuroscience has shown our development, and so I was telling Danielle, I think my amygdala tries to run the show sometimes, right? My fear-based brain, my primitive brain. So at the same time, because it's like I had roots and I had wings because of where I grew up and the love of my family and all of that, and my faith, my belief in God. And so it was good. I had my moments just like anyone else, but I was pretty straight and narrow. I was like kind of your goody two shoes, if you would, and kind of the voice of reason. My friends joke and say like I was that voice of reason and kind of that counselor a little bit from a young age.
Still that in so many ways. I'm like, my thoughts are spiraling. There are so many different options. And then I call you and you're like, okay, can I just be real with you for a minute? And you like make everything make sense. So that's always been your personality. Like that's been a gift.
I mean, even in kindergarten, I can remember being able to talk. I guess it's a gift of counsel,
Yeah, I would say so.
So and I had a lot of, and then decided I played softball all the way through my growing up years. That was like a big thing. That was kind of my sport. I was never great at it, never amazing at it, but I was good enough. I mean, maybe like better than average. I did it more because I enjoyed being around the people, and I did have fun with the sport. But going into high school, it gets much more competitive, and there are a lot of people that want to go on and play college ball. And as my high school career went on, I realized like I really don't want to do this, as far as I don't want to choose my college based on this sport, because I wasn't going to be able to go to a university. I'd need to go to a junior college to potentially like walk on a team or something like that. So I decided in my senior year that I wasn't going to play. And that was a great decision, because it really freed up a lot of time. Like if you're in a sport or your child's in a sport, it really is a big commitment. So my senior year, I stepped away from that. Was able to just more enjoy all the different things that you can be a part of as a senior in high school. And then I also decided to go to college in Texas. If you were in the top 10% of your class, you got automatic admission to any university in the state. Now, your admission didn't pay your tuition, right? Really? So you still had to do what you needed to do, but at least your application, it wasn't like approve or denied. It was pretty much like if you're in top 10%, you're in. So I was thinking about, ironically enough, because our conference for Heart Soul Strength is going to be in Waco. I almost went to Baylor University, which was in Waco.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then at the last moment, I think was the providence of God now. But at the time, I really couldn't have told you why I switched. But at the last moment, I switched to go to Texas A&M University, which is in College Station, Texas. Shout out Aggies. I can't wear my ring since having my son, but I have my Aggie ring. So I went there, and like I said, I think that was the providence of God, because with my mom passing when I was so young. So my mom passed when I was 19. The summer between my freshman year of college and my sophomore year of college, I was able to run home a lot more. It was just the right distance. It was like 2.5, 3 hours away, depending on traffic. And so I could like be in college, do my college thing, but also come home on the weekends or come home when I needed mom and dad. And had a lot of really special moments too of being able to express my appreciation and gratitude for them, of like, hey, you guys weren't perfect, but you also weren't crazy. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job.
I appreciate you a lot. And just because you see other people and their journeys and you're like, wow, okay, I did not have it so bad. And not that I had any kind of idea of that, but you know how it is. Like teenagers, you have a tiger by the tail, right? You think you know everything. So anyway, that was my journey of getting through high school and then kind of stepping into
college. At what point did you lose your mom?
Yeah.
Was that while you were in college?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was in between my freshman and sophomore year of college. So I was 19 years old.
Okay.
And that story is pretty dramatic, and I would say really shaped who I am and really shaped, like even more so than anything that happened in my childhood, I would say. My mom was amazing. Like she was my hero. And anybody that knew my mom, like still to this day, my friends talk about my mom. Still to this day, they consider her like a positive influencer, almost another parent. She was like another parent in their life. My parents really had an open door policy with my friends and my brother's friends and loved them and spoken to them and were just really, really great people. And so with her being my hero, I think too, you know, going through that childhood abuse situation, my mom was like my safe place. She was my hero. She was my, you know, protector, all those things. So when she passed away, that was super discombobulating, right? Because that's just like any kind of safety net, baby blanket, security, whatever, it's like yanked out from under you. So it was very hard. And what happened was when I was 16, she had her first heart attack, and it was called the Widowmaker, if anyone's familiar with heart health. And it was a miracle she survived that. Her cardiologist had been practicing for 20 plus years, and he said he had never seen this. Basically, like this vein grew over, and had that vein not grown over, she wouldn't have survived it, but she did. And that is with purpose, right? So she and my dad, they decided to change some diet things, and they started exercising and doing weightlifting, which was so unusual back, you know, this is like the early 2000s. And so I'm like, oh, my parents are so weird. You know, they had like a weight bench in the garage, but now I'm like, oh, they were strong. Like with it,
yeah,
you know?
for sure.
I remember when I moved into college, I was living in the dorms initially, and it was several flights of steps up. And I remember when they were moving me in, she would get like winded and have to stay like on the landing for a minute. She never made a big deal out of it. It was just, we kept it like as lighthearted as we could. I was telling Danielle too, I was kind of skittish to learn how to drive. I didn't get my permit. In Texas, you can get your permit at 15 and your driver's license at 16. I think you can even maybe get it sooner if it's like a hardship license or something. For me, I didn't even get my permit until I was 16 because I was scared to drive, number one. And number two, my mom had had her heart attack when I was 16. So our family joke, forgive me for like a little bit of the dark humor and sarcasm, but we were like, we don't want Holly to give her a second heart attack, you know, so.
Is that dark humor or is that just humor? I feel like, I mean, foreshadowing, right?
Well, yeah.
But not.
Yeah, maybe it's a little darker now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be dark if
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
No.
Holly did not give her mom. Yes.
That, obviously, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
But I did actually, like, that was something that I had to process through because so I'm going to not go through every detail because it's just too long and there's no need. But fast forward to when my mom did pass, we were actually on a family vacation. There's a place in Texas called Garner State Park. It's very popular outside of San Antonio. Beautiful place. We vacationed there like my whole childhood almost. We started going when I was really young, probably intermediate school, Danielle.
In those intermediate years, 3rd through 5th.
Somewhere in
like that.
My parents had both vacationed there as children with their separate families. So it was really cool that was our tradition, right?
Yeah.
And because my dad owns his own business and my dad is in land development, the summertime is a boom time for him. Anyone who's in real estate knows there's seasons to that business, right? So land development, it's part of real estate because he has his broker's license and all that. So he had things going on in the summer. My mom was very independent, very bold personality. She was like, cool with, you know, she's like, we're going to have our fun and you can join us whenever you can join us kind of thing. Oftentimes we would go to Garner for like 2 weeks in the summer and obviously my mom stayed the whole time, and my dad would usually pop in on the weekends or come as he could. And then it would be me. My brother would usually be there. And then we had extended family, like my dad's several cousins and different people would vacation there as well. And we usually tried to time it so that we could be there together, at least have some crossover, right? Because it was fun. It almost felt like a big family reunion. So we were there for that, and I was there, and I was the only person in my immediate family, like my family of origin. So out of mom, dad, me, brother, I was the only one there because my dad was working, so he had stayed back to do some projects. And then my brother was at something called Boys State, which was basically an academic honor at the time. So he was in Austin, which wasn't too far from where we were staying, but he was with the school. So he was kind of like doing his own thing. And that was a good thing. That was an honor to be there. So I was the only one in my immediate family. And then my mom's sister, so my aunt, her daughter, my cousin, and her son, and then my dad's extended family, tons of them were there. And the day that she passed, we were floating the river. So in Texas, you do something called tubing, and people are probably like familiar with it outside of Texas. I know in the north they talk about tubing being in the snow. This is in a river. So you get an inner tube and you do a float. So you start at point A and you float down to point B, however long. You can do several miles, you can do long, short, whatever. So we were doing a float, and the river was super high that year because we had some flooding, which is also pretty common growing up around here, and that's in the Texas Hill Country. So you can get even flash floods that happen. So I don't remember what the cause of it was, but I just know the river was really high to the point that we were like, are we going to even be able to tube at the beginning of our vacation? And it turns out we could. It was just a little adventurous, maybe a little dicey, but we had gone through some rapids. And when we hit these rapids, we all got flipped over in our tubes. And when my mom had flipped over, she was wearing a hat, and she had our cabin key in the hat. And so we had to kind of find that. And it was just a little bit chaotic. And my mom, it was like she couldn't catch her breath. So we pulled over to the side, so to speak, like on the riverbank. And we're just kind of like waiting for her to sort of, in my teenage impatience, it was sort of like, get it together, like what's going on. I thought maybe like that had just made her anxious or something. But it was more than that. She was having that heart attack, and we didn't know. So as it progressed, it became clear, like, okay, something else is going on here, like a medical event. And this guy was tubing down with his family, and he noticed, and thank God he did. And it must have been his medical background. And again, like, I believe God like orchestrates things. So he was floating past. He notices us. He notices my mom in particular, and comes over, and he's like, hey, can I help you? And I'm able to tell him that, yeah, my mom's a heart patient, and, this is what's going on. And he was like an EMT or a paramedic, or, I don't unfortunately know the difference, but something along those lines. And in addition to that, his son was a heart patient. So he had intimate knowledge of not just emergency medical care, but also how to care for a heart patient. Yeah. So he was there and helping us.
And at this, was she still conscious?
She was talking. She was like, it was kind of winded. She was pale. She was kind of like pacing a little bit, because I'm sure like just adrenaline and stuff. And he said, ma'am, you don't look good. Like, I would like you to sit down. And like pretty much like around that time, she ended up crumpling. She just passed out, and she never regained consciousness. So I didn't mention this before, but I had two people with me, I'll say friends, and one of them is still my friend to this day. She was someone I grew up with and was very close to our family, almost like a sister. And so when this happened, someone's like, go get help. We need help. Go get help. And our cabin was like, I don't know, a mile and a half away. And so we start going, and it really, I'm pretty good in a crisis, but it just hit me. Like, I kind of knew. I don't know how to explain it other than I just knew like this was not going to be okay. But at that point, I was still holding on to hope. But at that point, my friends were having to sort of like carry me a little bit, because my knees had buckled. I was getting emotional.
Yeah, that's your mom.
And yeah, and you watch it, So it was later on when I processed it, it wasn't just the grief and the loss of a mom. It was also the trauma of watching your mom pass. And it wasn't like, we had such a great relationship too. It was a lot of things. It was messy. It was messy grief. A counselor would call it complicated grief. So we got back to I think we went to my family's cabin, my extended families on my dad's side, and told them. And it was just incredible to see everyone mobilize to try to get my mom the help that she needed. So we had tubed down the river. We were down in an embankment. There was no direct access, right? It wasn't as if you could get on a boat and come down, because it was a low enough river to tube and an inner tube. And then additionally, it wasn't a straight road to her anywhere. But thankfully, we were in Texas. So as you've gotten to witness, a lot of guys have these huge, or families have these huge pickup trucks with big tires, and they're jacked up and elevated and all of that. And so lifted, I guess, to be proper about it. And they just came out of the woodwork. All these people came out trying to help, and they're trying to get their trucks down to this point to get her. My cousin, and many people are trained. They go to fire school. They're trained as EMTs. So he was trained. He came down, was trying to help her. At the time, I called 911 to get an ambulance. I called my dad and was telling him. Now, at this time, my dad had sort of thought my mom maybe broke her leg or something, because it was just not clear what was going on. And then also, I don't know at one point, but at some point, my family contacted my brother too to kind of let him know something was going on. So we went back to our cabin. I got all my mom's medication, because I was just trying to think they're going to want to know what medication she's on. And so I grabbed her pill container and got the car keys and left to try to go and meet. And they ended up getting this ambulance down there that was this converted vehicle. It was used to be some kind of military vehicle or something, and they were able to get that down there to try to get her. And so we got down there. There's all the craziness going on. They're trying to get her lifted up to the ambulance. And then my cousin he was with her, and it was very traumatic and dramatic, because for instance, they had cut her bathing suit off. So she was exposed. And as a young lady seeing that, it's what in the world is going on? And so it was a lot going on.
And at this point, did she have a pulse?
Well, so with my cousin, I was is she still alive? Does she have a pulse? And he said, it's intermittent. And he's but we're trying. And in my logical mind, I was okay, there's still hope. She's going to live. This was where I've had a profound spiritual experience, where I'm standing there, I'm watching the scene unfold. I can see it happening all in front of me. But all of a sudden, everything just got very quiet and almost blew around. And it was I heard the words, everything's going to be okay. But when I heard those words, even though I felt extreme peace, and I'm pretty sure there was even an angel present, it's hard to describe, because it was such a spiritual experience. It wasn't what was going on necessarily in the natural. But I knew that I knew in that moment, everything's going to be okay did not mean everything's going to be all right. It did not mean she was going to live. It meant a bigger picture. Yeah. And I was okay, okay. And so I'm just sort of chewing on that. And then you're still in crisis mode, right? You're adrenaline's pumping. I'm driving, my mom drove a Volvo. So I'm driving my mom's Volvo,
Yeah.
And speeding behind this ambulance. Thankfully, Volvos can go pretty fast, FYI.
They've got some pickup. What is it called?
Get up and go.
Get up and go.
Or pick up and go, whatever you want to say. So we were, I was hauling it. And we got to this little country hospital in Leaky, Texas, however you want to say it. People say it different ways. I'm sure the locals will be cringing. But we got in there, and they they had already rushed her back, and it was we ran in. I threw their pill container out that, here, because they're just shouting questions at you. And then pretty suddenly they put us in the chapel. And I was this is bad news. They don't bring you the chapel for
good news.
No, it's not like a little kumbaya session, you know, like, it's going to be serious. So I'm just sitting there, and like, that was just the longest. It was probably like minutes, but I don't really know the time frame. It all is blurry, and I had family with me, thank God. Like, I mean, my dad's cousins were there. My aunt was there. So I wasn't alone, even though I didn't have my dad and I didn't have my brother with me. And obviously my mom was, being, I don't know, worked on or whatever was happening. And in those moments, you just have so many thoughts. I'm just like,
we were just on the river.
And also like something else, my mom and I had kind of been fighting that morning. Mm-hmm. It was like catty, like, I'm 19, hormonal. She's trying to deal with the hormonal 19-year-old. So it was like, man, I wish we hadn't been angry with each other, Mm-hmm. And all this stuff was going on. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, if she's incapacitated, that's, we'll deal with that. And I will, I'll just stay home. I'll leave college. I'll care for her. She's cared for me for my whole life. I'll care for her. Like, you're just thinking all these crazy thoughts. And then the doctor initially came in, and that's probably where those crazy thoughts were at. I kind of thought that he was telling me that she was going to live, but she wasn't going to be fully functional. But then it wasn't long later that he came in and was basically like very tactfully like, ma'am, we need to deal with your mom's body kind of thing. And I'm like, what? Wait, we need to do something. And I'm like, okay. So somewhere also in this timeline, and forgive me if it feels a little messy, but it was just, it was messy. It was not like linear. And so at some point we had to call my dad. So this place is like, I don't know, 5 hours away from my house, 6 hours away from my house. I'm not sure. And as soon as my dad heard something was wrong, he grabs his stuff, hops in his truck, and is heading that way. Right. But obviously with the timeline, he still has several hours to go to get there. So we get the doctor, and later on I regretted this, but now as an adult, like a real true adult, 19 is adult-ish, I have more compassion for this, but for a long time I felt guilty. But basically we had the doctor, I told my dad, like, hey, we have serious news, like, this is bad, you need to pull over. And then I gave the phone to the doctor, and the doctor broke the news of like, your wife has passed, whatever he said. I don't even know what he said. Then like, he hands the phone back to me with my dad, and my dad's like, I am so sorry. And he's like, I'm so sorry you're there for this, and I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. And he's like, also, can you help me? We're going to need to do some things, and I'm not there. And, I'm driving, and like, obviously this has now become an even dangerous situation for him, because he's got to get it together enough to drive to his kids, and drive to his wife's body and extended family and all that. And he's like, and I'm like, yeah, of course, and I mean, we're just all, you're in shock at that point, and somewhere in this, I did get to go back and say goodbye to my mom before they left. And I don't know what all I said. I do remember like whatever I said, the nurses were like crying, it was like, it was hard. Like, and I look back with so much compassion on myself at that moment, even though I, in the time of it, you're just trying to do what you do, right? You're just trying to get through it. But yeah, I mean, that's the moment I grew up. Not to say that I hadn't already taken steps into adulthood, but childhood was over at that point. Like, I grew up in that moment. And, I had to, I didn't have to, but I chose to step in and help. And I called local funeral homes. Thankfully, the hospital was very helpful with resources. There was a bit of a family connection. So I had to establish a funeral home there for just a bit, then get a transportation company to transport her back to where we live, and then the funeral home there. And so that just started this snowball of that whole cascade of events that happens, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with when someone passes away.
There's so many details. And yeah, I have experienced quite a bit of death and like the aftermath of death and just making all of those decisions. But I would really love for you to share just a little bit about, you mentioned how you're able to look back at yourself during that time with compassion and kind of meet yourself where you were as a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that process of what you had to do that and how that has carried you forward into your adult years and then becoming a mom? And I know that, as your therapist said, my therapist told me the same thing. With every stage of life, you have to kind of re-grieve the trauma that you've gone through, whether it's sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, or it's the loss of a parent. And so just talk to us a little bit about that process of being able to look back and kind of meet yourself where you were at 19 and how that has been helpful in your journey moving forward.
So I think like a huge thing for me was learning about the grieving process and becoming like an expert on grief, even though no one wants to do that, you know? And you learn about the stages of grief. You learn that it's not linear, that it's messy. Having mentors, like people that have gone ahead of you in grief. And that helped me tremendously to be able to, the only way out of grief is like through it. Yeah. There's no way out of it. You have to process it and go through it. I think there's that saying, time heals all wounds. It doesn't heal all wounds, but what happens is you learn to live without that loved one. Mm-hmm. Like I have never experienced an adult life with my mom in my life. And that doesn't make it okay. And there are definitely times where I will cry, and sometimes at different times of the year, maybe triggers for me. And it's a lot of radical self-acceptance to not judge myself, because love has no time limit. I still love my mom. I know she still loves me. I grieve with hope because I'll see her again one day. And, 20 years down the road, it's totally different than when it was 20 minutes of dealing with it. I remember when she had passed, I had to go back to the cabin and we had to pack up. We were going to be there for 2 weeks of vacation. Talk about a spoiler, right? I mean, we didn't even go on vacation as a family for a while after that, as you might imagine. Yeah. So we had to pack up, and I was waiting for my dad to get there and my brother to get there because I wasn't even yet grieving with the people that were in my core family, my family of origin. And I remember like when my dad got there and my brother got there, and it was just like, oh, such a relief to have them with me. And then I remember like after all the doing was done, and people just don't know how to handle you with grief. Like they want to handle you with kid gloves. And I was just sort of like, let me work, let me pack up some stuff. I don't know what to do with my hands kind of moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's wisdom for anyone that has someone who's grieving, is like, just let them do it their way. Everybody's way is going to be different. And say it. Don't be afraid to bring it up. Don't be afraid to talk about their loved one in a memory. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do. Also, don't ask permission. Like, show up and help. And if they don't need you, they'll tell you to go home. I had a cousin that, her name's Annette. Annette, she's like on my dad's side. I'm telling you, like every time I was at the house, at our home, once we got home, it was like every time I woke up or looked around, she was there. She was like helping put food in the freezer. Next thing I know, she's in here like bustling around the kitchen. Next thing I know, she's over there scrubbing a toilet. She's just helping and they're present. And it was so soothing to have that. And when it had just happened, we were still at the cabin. I remember not wanting to go to sleep that night because I knew it would be like the last night I had on earth that my mom had been present with me. And that was like such a huge moment. And I think as a parent, what happened is a couple of different things. Is like, I think just growing up and becoming a wife and a mom helps me have compassion because I see how young I was. And I see like I was doing the best I could. And I really tried to step in and help out as I can and could at that time. But also it's like, there's just such a grace there for where I was at in life. And even maybe like a little bit of grief for that girl who felt like she had to grow up so quickly versus like getting to just experience young adulthood in a different light. Because as you might imagine, I mean, that wrecked my college experience. I hated college, but it wasn't because I hated college. It was because my whole life was shipwrecked at that point.
Right.
And we were all just grieving. We still maintained relationship and closeness as family and love, but it's different. Like a mom brings so much to the table. And so I think too, probably I had always valued becoming a wife and becoming a mom, but I think I cherished and valued that even more because I saw the impact that my mom had. And even though I only had her for 19 years, I, to this day, am still relying on everything she gave me up until that point. And I remember so many things that she did give me, even things like death is a part of life. She prepped me for people passing away. Little did we know some of the things she prepped me for were to live without her. And then some of the positives, like, again, a little bit of edgy or darker on the darker side of humor. But I saw my friends go through so many issues with their moms, like as they were trying to become adult women and step into their own, whether it was stepping into their career, moving into their own place, becoming a leader, a wife, a mom, whatever it was. And there would be like that friction and that drama. Yeah. And I would just like laugh with them sometimes and be like, well, I've never had to deal with that. Yeah. I don't know. You know, I didn't have that experience.
I mean, in some ways, I'm sure your friends were like, oh, wait, I have something to be grateful for.
Yeah, you know, it may like have.
Humbles you.
And it like broke the ice, right? Because like we've all either been on the giving end of that call or the receiving end of that call where it's like frantic. And then it's like, oh, you're right. And you kind of laugh it off. And then it's like, all right, how are we going to triage and handle the situation kind of thing? So, yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say out of that experience. But overall, I think there is just a gratitude and like really taking every day. I don't want to say that I never take days for granted because I do, but I think I do have a bigger picture of the brevity of life and like really doing my best to like straddle the line of not walking in fear with my child because like one day my child will live without me. Right. But also like grateful for every day I get with him and then what can I give to him that he is prepared to be his own human. Yeah. You know, whether I'm present with him or not present with him.
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing that story. I know that there's complicated feelings with that entire situation. There always will be. You loved your mom. She was your hero. Yeah. And she taught you so much. And for you to have to witness her death is not something you could ever imagine or plan for. No. I think there's so many gifts that have come of the way that you've approached that trauma. Yeah. Because the trauma itself does not feel like a gift. But how you respond and how you demonstrate resilience and how you grow from that and the ways that you're able to mature. Yeah. Those are the gifts that come from such horrible situations like that. Those traumas, that the grief, the cycles of like, did I do enough? Or the complicated feelings that come up that come up when you go through an experience like that. So the next part of what I'd like to talk about right now is going into past college. Now you know that you want to be a wife and a mom. You said that. But you haven't found someone yet. Yes. And for those that don't know, I'm just going to quickly skim over how Holly and I met just for the sake of time. And one day, I mean, very, very soon, I think she's going to be back. You'll find out more when we find out more. But Holly and I met when I was 15 and she had moved to Nashville.
Like mid-20s. I don't know exactly.
Mid-20s, somewhere in there. And I had gone to Mercy Ministries. Actually, you guys can go back to episode 0. I talk about Mercy, how I went there for treatment. I had an eating disorder and had come from a background of abuse. And all of that to say, I was I think 4 or 5 months into the program, and Holly came to Mercy as a counselor. She was a counselor. Now, she wasn't my counselor. Just to be clear. Yeah, just to be clear. But she was a counselor in that same program. And so that's how we met. But we really didn't know each other than she knew I was somebody who got kicked out of the program. Then I think years later, we connected on Instagram maybe. I knew she was a copywriter and I was in the creative business industry. And so we had just reconnected. And so that's how our friendship really began, was yeah, I know you kind of, but I didn't really know you. Yeah. And by that time I was in my late 20s, but you're in your 20s. You go to Nashville, you get your master's program in marriage and family therapy, which is what we talked about in your bio. And then you go to Mercy to be a counselor.
Yes.
and you're open to having a husband and growing a family, but like, what was that season like?
Crazy.
Yeah.
It was like a wild season. I mean, I never knew I would leave Texas first and foremost.
Yeah.
And more than that, I never dreamed of living in Nashville. I know a lot of people did, but I am no singer. I am no songwriter. So it just never really occurred to me to live in Nashville. But my best friend, her husband's from Nashville. She ended up there. A lot of her family is there. And so when I was in undergrad, as I had spoken about before, I had really truly thought about quitting college, quitting AM and coming home and going to a junior college or a local college or going somewhere in Houston.
Yeah.
But I would have lost all these hours. I realized, okay, I'm going to have to stick it out. And then secondarily, and I'm like, Holly, what were you thinking? You can do nothing with this degree. You have to get a master's degree. And clearly I was struggling, right? I mean, I was on the struggle bus. Yeah. So this was a very not great time. I decided to stick it out. I ended up rearranging some things and I had a double minor. And so I dropped one of my minors, and that afforded me the ability to graduate a little bit early. So I was slated to graduate in May of 2007. I ended up graduating in December of 2006. And I had my bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in business administration.
Really?
Yes.
How did I not know that? Okay.
Writing on the wall, but I had no clue. And I don't even know why I did that. I mean, again, I'll be honest with you, didn't even know, but all of it, we know Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good. So not everything is good. And clearly this was a very rough chapter in my world, but things were still, being orchestrated. And so I ended up coming home for a time. My dad, as I stated before, is a business owner. So I worked for his business. And that was such a gift during that time because it allowed me to have deeper healing, be at home with family, close to loved ones. And then I was able to go to counseling a couple of times a week because at this point, I'd had like very little grief counseling. My dad, I think, had tried to take me somewhere because I was struggling with situational depression over this, loss and grief. But it never really took off because I wasn't ready. Right. And finally I had finished school. So I had a little bit more brain space and brain power to put towards counseling. And this was also my first experience with someone who had a professional background. This person had their master's degree or something, doctorate along those lines, and also was faith-based. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. So after I was home for a bit, I applied to a master's program, and I decided the reason I chose Nashville area was because my best friend and her husband were there. And I thought, well, while they're young married, they don't have kids. Like we can still run around and have a lot of fun. And, I'm single and it'd be fun to get out of my hometown and see. And so I did that, and I was super proud of myself. And I think had my mom not passed on that, I don't think I would have ever left my hometown. I think I would have been content to stay. And so that kind of poked and prodded me to jump out of the nest, so to speak, and went to Nashville, ended up falling in love with Nashville. I know you're in love with Nashville.
We love Nashville.
It's still a heart city for me. Love it. And while I was there, I got my master's degree at Trevecca Nazarene University. I wanted just a different experience. A&M was so massive. I mean, I had hundreds of people in some of my classes, thousands of people at the campus. And then Trevecca was much smaller. I was able to double up my class load and graduate. I think I graduated a little early with them too. It was my first time in an education experience. I felt like the kid showing up to class with their shiny red apple for their teacher because it was things that I wanted to learn, things that were interesting to me. And the reason that I picked marriage and family therapy was I believe in marriage and family, like that's a big thing, but also the whole systems theory. I'm like a systems theory girly, and the whole process and thought behind systems theory is that if I can change you and not me change, but if I can help you to take ownership and you change and you go back into your system, whatever that be, your school, your workplace, whatever, family, then you're going to enact change. And because you are changed and you bring change, then things around you will change. So it's sort of like the eternal optimist, right? Mm-hmm. Went there, graduated, but
eternal optimist who is also aware of toxic positivity.
right. I'm a realist. I'm
you
very
are
much
a
a
realist.
realist too.
Yes.
I toe the line there. And I think that's something I got from my mom. She was very like fun and positive, but also like on the real.
Yeah.
Hey there, friends. Are you ready to rise fully into your calling as a leader? I want to introduce you to Heart, Soul, Strength, a ministry dedicated to equipping leaders like you to serve with purpose, resilience, and joy, fully aligned with God's will for your life and the people you have specifically been called to lead. Whether you are leading a company from your home while you're raising small kids, or you're the leader of a Fortune 500 company, I want to personally invite you to our first immersive event, the Rise Leadership Conference, happening November 12th through 14th, 2025 in Waco, Texas, at the stunning Deerfield Estates, just 10 minutes from downtown Waco. This will be a weekend of worship, actionable workshops, connections, networking, and fellowship with women who share the same anointing on their lives, but maybe at different levels. It's designed to recharge your heart, soul, and strength, and to empower you to lead with clarity and confidence. So whether you're able to join us in person or simply just want to support the mission of Heart, Soul, Strength, where we are called to equip leaders, your donation makes a difference. Visit heartsoulstrength.org to learn more, to donate, or to grab your ticket to Rise. Let's rise into leadership the way that God intended, together. You are created worthy, and through Him, you have the heart, soul, and strength to make a kingdom impact in whatever role you're serving in. God's got you, and you got this.
So while I was in school, I got this job as a supplemental counselor in a high school setting. And so I was able to start getting my feet wet with that, because in school you get your practicum. So I had to do like 300 face-to-face hours of counseling.
Whoa.
Then I got this job that allowed me to, at a master's level, you have to disclose that you have a master's level or that you're finishing your degree or whatever. And then that you have someone that is licensed that you report to, all that. So everything was, you have a lot of mentors. You have a lot of people surrounding you, helping you to succeed, right? And in that school setting, I was able to do a lot of things. I was able to start counseling because the school counselors were dealing a lot with the state mandated testing and all of those things, IEPs, all the different things that they have to deal with and get to deal with the students. And graduation prep was huge, like prepping the seniors to go off to college and scholarships and all of that. And then for me, I more got to deal with the emotional stuff. Like the kids are showing up and they're maybe not being able to give it their all because of interpersonal drama with other students. We definitely had like girl fights over their significant other, or, you know, friend fights and whatever, all the different things that high schoolers deal with. And then plus the real issues of them dealing with true mental health crises or dealing with things at home that they really shouldn't be dealing with at home. Right. So I got to do individual, group counseling. And then I also got to do like some classroom presentations, go in. And then we did, every other year, we did like this massive school assembly that was in association with a club on campus that was helping students to make the choice to be drug and alcohol free. And so we would do all of those different things. I was there like a couple of years. I don't remember the exact timeline. And then I heard about Mercy and had a friend that was connected. I thought, okay, I would love to work there one day. That was bridging the gap again between mental health and ministry. Mm-hmm. I thought that would be great. So I talked to my friend and I ended up finding out there was an opening, applied, got the job, was able to go there. And it really was living out a dream in a lot of ways. Like I thought, wow, here I am, 20 something years old. I've reached the mountain. I've reached the top. Like what is there after this? And at the same time, even though from a career standpoint, from a ministry standpoint, things were at an all-time high, doesn't mean it wasn't without challenges. It was challenging. It was stressful at times. At the same time, I'm still dealing with being out. This is really my first time truly out on my own alone, so to speak, because, family's back in Texas. Now I'm here or there in Nashville, figuring out a career, navigating okay, I don't have my mom to call and ask questions to or get knowledge from or have her come visit and help me decorate my apartment or whatever, and then also that longing of wanting to be married and wanting to have a family. And I think, something that I learned about myself, there was, even though all of those were dreams and desires of my heart since childhood, I do think there was some unhealth there about you kind of want to, you got to process that. At least for me, I had to process that grief and not look to just start a family to try to fix it in a way. Not that you're consciously doing that, but you're thinking, oh, if I have my own family, it'll solve all this stuff. And then spoiler alert, your family is made of people. And so adore my husband, adore my child, but they bring their own stuff, right? Yes. In addition to my stuff. So yeah, it was fun. It was sad. It was exciting. It was lonely. It was
all the things
that the young adult goes through in life.
So what made you make the decision to go from Nashville back to Texas? Because now you live very close to Mont Belvieu.
Yeah, crazy. Again, never knew I'd go to Nashville. And then also once I was there, I'm I really like this place. This is cool. We have hills here. I called them mountains, but there they called them hills. And I'm I don't want to go back to Texas, the flatlands. I miss the beach. I miss being able to drive to the beach. But I came back to Texas because I did miss my family and I did miss Tex-Mex food. Danielle's life was changed by stuffed avocados.
It was changed. And now I might start crying because I want one so bad. So anyways.
She told me the one thing she wanted when she came to town was that. I'm we will make it happen. We made it happen on day one.
Day one.
Because of Snowmageddon coming.
So good.
But I missed both.
And family.
So
maybe the other way around. We will not know.
We won't. I'm just going to protect the innocent and the guilty, right? We won't say things. So I was kind of wanting to come back home but not knowing, and just, it kind of felt like if you're a believer in Christ, you've experienced those transitional seasons where you have felt it starts becoming uncomfortable where you're at or what you're doing, and not in a way of it's wrong or bad or sinful or something. It's just I like to describe it as the grace has lifted. So the grace was lifting on the season. The grace was lifting on being at Mercy. The grace was lifting on my living arrangements in Nashville. The grace was lifting. It just felt okay, I'm in transition here. And I was talking to my stepmom, who I didn't go into all that, but my dad waited a while and then ended up marrying an incredible woman who is in our lives and such a wonderful grandmother to my son. I just couldn't ask for any better. My dad and stepmom have a little farm. They actually had 6 baby goats this week, which is crazy. One goat had triplets, one had twins, and one had a singleton. So shout out to the goats for keeping the farm going. So my son and his cousin were there this week playing. So even though it's different, God is so faithful to restore things. And I can't even imagine my son not having his Coco. Her name's Connie, so we call her Coco. That's her grandma name. So Connie had called me and was hey, there's this church here, Mercy Gate Church, that's looking for someone. I don't even really know how she got connected to know that they needed someone on staff. They needed an administrative assistant or something. My dad were attending at the time. They attended Mercy Gate for quite a while, and now they attend it at a church in their city that they live in now. I'm isn't she cute? She thinks because I work at Mercy Multiplied in Nashville, I can just hop over to this other Mercy place in Texas. I'm it's not how it works.
Yes.
So I kind of wrote it off, right? And it was just, it kind of, I guess, kept gnawing at me, or something happened, and I decided to just talk to the person who was the business administrator at the time. Her name is Beth. She's an amazing lady. And talked to her and thought, okay, I'll just apply. And it was a receptionist admin position. And there was also a piece of this story. So I had actually stepped away from Mercy Ministries and stepped into a part-time receptionist admin role at another ministry at this time.
Oh.
And I couldn't even exactly tell you why. I mean, I think what happened was I think I'd made that decision that I was going to move back to Texas, but I needed some time to like get things in order.
Yeah.
Also, I needed to recover from being so full on in ministry. I think I actually went, okay, this is right. I went through like another season of healing and counseling because being in the environment of Mercy brought up like in me, I did deal with some secondary trauma, and it did bring up in me of like, okay, as an adult woman, like, yes, my parents did everything right, the best way that they could when I was a child, but I'm not a child anymore. And so as an adult woman, I needed to process through my own childhood sexual abuse, because something that happened that while I was in Nashville was I actually did have a very short first marriage. I married a guy. It was very unhealthy. He was kind of proclaimed himself to be in ministry and to be a pastor, and even proclaimed himself to have a prophetic gift and all these different things. But the truth was he was extremely unhealthy. He had no accountability. He had no job. Just all this stuff where, almost was more like cultish. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, I'm like, why did I choose this individual to get married to? And I wanted to figure all this out. And so I went through some deeper healing, all that kind of stuff.
And this was all during that time that you were in Nashville.
Correct. Yeah. And this was like towards the end of my time in Nashville. I was there 6 years total. This was probably like the last couple years.
So go through a divorce from a person that you didn't really know the extent of what was going on there.
No.
And you are no longer working in Mercy, which as a resident of Mercy, I can vouch for what a hot mess is express it is just to be in. And it's not any shade on the ministry itself at all. I love Mercy. Because I went to Mercy, I met you. Yeah. I met so many of my incredible friends. I healed. I got to understand the goodness and grace of God. I got to experience spiritual gifts. I could go on and on about what Mercy did for me. But I can also say
it's made of people.
Yes. You put 40 girls who have come from backgrounds riddled with trauma, abuse, eating disorders, unplanned pregnancies, cutting, suicidal ideation, drug problems into a
kind of reality show.
It
when
really
you start
is.
telling it.
And I was telling you this a couple nights ago when we were talking. The role of a counselor in an environment like that is really the heaviest role, in my opinion, that you could hold coming into an environment like that, because part of the rules at Mercy is like you don't just trauma dump on your fellow resident.
Healthy boundaries. Yeah.
We were actually told to like not
Let's
share.
trauma bond.
Yes, we don't need to, like, we can bond. We can talk about, our interest and likes and things, but like maybe don't talk about the extreme amount of trauma you went through, because you don't know what that's going to do to your fellow Mercy sister. And so in good faith, that was a part of the dynamic. But the only place that you could talk about the actual reason that you were there was with your counselor.
Yeah.
And so, when you say secondary trauma, it's like, I could see why, like anyone, even the most experienced counselor in the world could very well walk out of there, and probably did, with some secondary trauma, plus all of this additional stuff that has gone on. So all of that to say, like, when that grace lifted, I'm sure that there was like some comfort in knowing that you would be able to go back and still work in ministry, but in a different capacity. Yeah.
And with that transitional position that I was in, sometimes in the kingdom of God, what looks like a step back is actually a step up. It is actually a step forward, and being willing to humble yourself, it has purpose. Like the Lord talks about that, and how much humility and honor like there is whenever you are okay with not being okay, and you're okay with seeking God and that healing. And so for me, like, sure, as far as a career trajectory, that was not the best move. Let's be honest. However, what ended up happening was two things. Number one, it afforded me the opportunity to like breathe, heal, and also start getting things in order, looking for a job. And then that door was opening here in Texas, and I was able to market myself as, hey, because their question was, which is a normal question, well, why would you want, you've been a counselor at this other ministry, you have your master's degree in counseling, why are you not like wanting a different position? Yeah. Why are you wanting a part-time receptionist? You're like, admin role?
Girl, let me tell you, I need some time.
Right? Which I was like doing pretty good at this point. You know, we are always in process, right? Always in progress. But I was able to say like, well, hey, I'm presently in this role. Yeah. I'm presently doing this. I enjoy it. And that is a part of me. Like the administrative side is there. I wouldn't say it's the most prolific thing out there, but I even remember going to my dad's office when I was a little girl, and I would get all the highlighters out and the papers. And back then it was typewriters. I'm dating myself, typewriters and early on computers and like a coffee machine. And I would just do all this stuff. And I would tell people one of the things that I wanted to do when I was really little, I would say, a counselor or an English teacher, which hello. Then I
basically both.
Right. I said a lawyer, which is like an advocate for the underdog, which is a big part of me. And then also a secretary, because back then that's what you called it. Yeah. And I loved it. I loved being at his office. I loved the whole thing. And I would always connect with his secretaries. And so I just was able to tell the church that. And what happened was I moved back to Texas, was able to again live with family. They were so gracious. Had more connection points, got to get even more connected to my stepmom, which was such a blessing, and got on staff at the church. And what happened was once I got on staff, it's like what the Bible says, like, your gift will make room for you and bring you before great men. And so I was able to be in the presence of greatness, first of all, like learning from my pastor, learning from all these incredible men and women and receiving. And then also they saw things in me. They saw a treasure in me. They saw gifts. They saw gold in me. And like I had done to so many people, even the young ladies that was able to help at the school or ministry, Mercy Ministries, which is multiplied now. Sorry, kind of confusing. But fast forward.
At the time it was Mercy Ministries, but.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So at the church, they were able to see that in me. And like next thing you know, I'm progressing. And so I am going from part-time to full-time. Right. And then after that, it's like we're going to start Freedom Ministries, which is basically the idea of what we're talking about, like allowing there to be, yes, like having pastoral counseling or referring out to someone who is a professional or a specialist in a certain area and getting the mental health help that you need, and also being prayerful and inviting the Holy Spirit in to bring healing and to bring comfort. So we started that initiative, and I got to be a forerunner in that area. We started healing rooms at the church. That was something that was in my pastor's heart. He had been physically healed from a condition, and he wanted to offer prayer. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of happened, through time. It wasn't instantaneous, and there was a lot of work. I remember being the receptionist / admin assistant, and we had to do these big church mail outs. It would be so discombobulating to my brain trying to figure out all these details of getting these church mail outs. And I did it, but I started learning how to lead to a whole new level, starting to learn how to lead volunteers, groups of volunteers, and training people. And it was just amazing. Mm-hmm. And definitely my stepmom was right. Shout out to Connie. Like, she was right. She nailed it.
Connie.
And not the last time she's been right either.
Oh, Coco, you're the best.
She is the best.
So while you're working at Mercygate, you are growing in your role. You're obviously meeting a lot of people, but you still have this desire to have a family.
I do.
And I know, because I'm staying in your family's house right now, that has happened. So tell me a little bit about how you met your husband, and then if you always wanted to have children, and just that whole process of like Carson coming to be, because he's the sweetest.
Oh, thank you. He's a lot of fun.
Yes.
So yeah, I was still single. Like, I had been divorced and then was single again. And I mean, honestly, that was such a blip on the radar. It's like, and I've been healed from it. It's like, sometimes I forget it's part of my story, even though it was. But with my husband, Ryan, I was so we had known each other a little bit. He went to the same school as me. He grew up in small town Texas and went to another school for most of his life. And then his junior year, he came to Barbers Hill. I knew him because he was a football player. He's very handsome. So he caught my eye. He was slightly younger. I'm a cougar, spoiler alert.
Stop. So, by like a year.
By like a year. I was a senior and he was a junior. But come on, in high school, that's kind of a big deal. At least most of me and my friends didn't date younger at that time. So it's a little more in vogue these days. But all that to say, we knew of each other, but he was more like friends with my brother, right? Mm-hmm. I was a senior, Ryan was a junior, and then Aubrey was a sophomore. Aubrey's my brother. And all that to say, we didn't know each other very well, but fast forward back in Texas, doing the online dating thing, because it's hard. You know, you want to have this meet cute, as they say now. You want to stroll up on somebody in the produce aisle or have like someone at church you're like together. So I don't know, like you want all these in life, like IRL moments. And for me, it didn't happen. So I was online dating. Disastrous. Me and Ryan have the craziest stories
to have a whole episode about, because I feel like I've heard that so much in the last few months of like disaster dating stories, and I kind of feel like, why do I know all these people with disaster dating stories? Let's share them.
That would be definitely a more lighthearted episode than this one. So we were putting ourselves out there for what we wanted and everything, but it's just, I mean, people are going to be people, right?
Yeah.
So we're on this app together. It was Match.com, and he ended up, you can see, I don't know how it is these days because I've been out of the game for several years, thank God. But back then you could see when someone was snooping on your profile, right? You could say, so-and-so looked at your profile, and he was looking at my profile, and I'm like, okay, well, why isn't he reaching out? And that was a big thing for me. I wanted a partner that would take initiative and someone who would pursue me. And so I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? So I was like, I don't know. He's probably, and Ryan is an introvert. And so because he kept to himself, when I did know him, I kind of perceived him as like, maybe he, was prideful or like thought a lot of himself or something. He doesn't. He's just quiet until you get him talking about cars, and then he won't stop talking. So it's like, that's his hobby, his special interest. And so I ended up, what I did was I like winked at him, because you could wink on the app, and then that sent him off to the races. So he was like, okay, this is great. And he started reaching out to me. We started talking, we connected, and he was thinking the same thing, ironically enough. He was like, oh, that's Aubrey's sister. I don't know. I used to hang out with Aubrey. Like, what is this? But we started talking. He arranged and asked me on a first date. We had our first date on January 30th and went to a great little place in Kemah on the, like, kind of by the water. If anyone's familiar with this area, the Kemah Boardwalk in Seabrook, Texas. And yeah, just like, that was kind of it, even though we didn't know it was it, right? That was like, as they say, your last first date. So we had a pretty immediate connection. We're both in our 30s at this point. And I think when you're a little older, the gift of that is you know what you want, you know your deal makers, and you know your deal breakers. Quickly identify that, hey, this is a guy that I could see myself with, and same for him. But at the same time, it wasn't like we were in a rush, and particularly because I had a past marriage that didn't make it, I'm like, let's see how this plays out. Not that I didn't have faith or that I was jaded at all, but I also wasn't in any type of rush, right? Mm-hmm. So next thing you know, and he really supported me. I was in full-time ministry at this time, on staff at the church, and he is in the oil and gas industry. He's a shift worker, but we made it work with our schedules. He really showed up for me in what I was doing at the church, and I was in charge of a conference at that time for the Freedom Ministries, and he came to the conference, and the last night of the conference, it just so happened to fall that there was a special speaker that was coming to our church, and he is someone that has a prophetic gifting, and then he will give words of encouragement to people as God leads him. And so what happened was, we were there at this conference, and that Sunday night, I think it was, he finished out with this special service or whatever. And next thing you know, he's operating in his gifting out of the fivefold ministry, and he's prophesying. And he's from South Africa. He has the most amazing accent. And he's like, come here, Holly. Like, he says my name very, like, I don't do it justice. Forgive me, South Africans, if you're listening. But called me up and just began to speak life over me and was like, it's time to marry, And this was #awkward because my boyfriend is there, who is like my newish boyfriend, right? This is like March at this point. So January 30th, first date. We knew we were going to be together at that point, but we also like weren't strongly like planning or anything, right?
Yeah.
We just kind of knew and like lightheartedly talked about it. And Ryan jokes and says I made him break all his rules because he was like on the 2-year dating plan. He thought he would date for 2 years, then be engaged for like a year or two, then get married. So Pastor Andre was speaking over me, and then Ryan ends up like coming up and is there, and it was just this moment of, wow, not only do we know in our hearts and in some of our conversations, this is where this is going. Now God has straight called it out in front of everybody, right?
Right.
And I think, like, I can't necessarily speak for anyone, but I think everyone was like, what is this really happening? And is it happening so fast? Which, like I said earlier, a suddenly can be a long time coming.
Yeah.
So even though this was a short runway, this has been years and years and years of, praying, crying, whining, fussing, believing, having faith, all of the above, going on horrendous dates, all of the above. So we have that moment. And then that really is like the kickoff to serious conversations of, wait, are we really going to do this thing? And also, Ryan just called me out one day. He's like, look, I think the only reason that we would wait is because of what everybody thought of us. And he's like, I don't think that's a good reason for us to wait. And I'm like, oh, okay. Also, good trait to have in someone that you're going to spend your life with, right? Yeah. You need them to be honest with you and real with you. So we end up getting engaged May 7th. We end up getting married on July 1st. So if you're doing the math, that was like from first date to walking down the aisle, so to speak, because we got married in this beautiful vineyard. It was, I guess, 5 months-ish, Yeah. So it was fast, and I don't necessarily recommend that to everyone, but I also don't not recommend it if that's your story and that's your journey.
Right.
And yeah, that's how we got married. And
what? I know. And then crazy. How long until you had Carson?
So we waited a little bit to have him, and I guess we were married like about 4 years-ish, and 4 years, and then we wanted to, get pregnant, and we didn't have any issues getting pregnant, and so that was a big blessing for us, and it was a concern based on my mom's history, right? I was like, how's this going to go down? And also seeing friends walk through different things. And, I know that's part of your story. And so you just like, you never know. Yeah. But for us, it happened really quickly. And I found out I was pregnant January of 2020. So as we know, that was interesting because, had a couple months of normal-ish stuff. Like it was flu season. I remember that. And it was like a worse than usual flu season, which now we know was probably COVID, right? And then I was just sick as a dog. I was like dealing with morning sickness, but it's, of course, we know all day and all night sickness. Mm-hmm. So it was rough. And then starting in March, we were in isolation. So my pregnancy and postpartum experience where that can wreck you just to have a quote unquote normal experience, whatever that is. That's more like a setting on a dryer, right? But it was anybody who was pregnant during that time or had a newborn, more isolating than normal. And totally abnormal circumstances and fear. In the beginning, there was just so much fear for pregnant women and babies and all of that. And so at the same time, you have such promise, you have such hope, you have such excitement. And I love to tell my son, he loves to hear about himself. I think a lot of kids do. I guess we all do. Yeah. And he, I'll tell him about when he lived in my tummy and he was like so crazy and active. Yeah. And I knew his personality before he was even here. Yeah.
We've got a little boy, a very energetic little boy.
Yes. Who knows what he wants.
Yes. But he's such a blessing and he brings so much joy. And also he's like the most handsome little boy.
Oh, thank you.
That photo that you sent me recently, I'm like, he literally looks like a little man. Like talk about... I just feel like that's a photo that you're going to have like his senior photo and then his like little baby photo. Yes.
And really I mean, I know he's mine, so that's special to me, but he's really has something about him that he connects with people. He has such an endearing quality to him. I think there's something special that, I mean, we all have something that God has for us, but there's like some sort of leadership quality about him. I'm excited to see what it is. Yes. And also, God help me parent in the process.
He did tell me that he's going to be a police officer and arrest me.
Yes, he did. He has stuck firm to the police officer thing for a while.
Yeah.
And the arresting you is just par for the course, my friend.
You know
We've
what?
all been arrested.
Fine.
So by Carson, not in real life.
Well, some of us.
Some of us.
Oh my goodness. Well, I just am so, so, so grateful for you. And honestly, spending this time and just like hearing your story in kind of chronological order has helped me to fill some of the gaps of like, oh, okay, so that's how that connected. And so all of that to say, it's just been such a joy and honor and working alongside you. And I know that we're going to end up talking more at some point on Created Worthy about like the work that we do with DDCC and your role from transitioning to lead conversion copywriter to integrator, all of these different things that we're figuring out. And then obviously sitting on the board and being a board member for Heart Soul Strength, like we've just been able to create so much together and brainstorm. And I just am so, so grateful for you. Mm-hmm. I know that all of these roles and experiences that you've gone through have really helped to shape the way that you lead within DDCC and Heart Soul Strength. And I just want to say thank you, because a lot of people could have lived similar stories as you and taken an entirely different route that would lead them to a much more unhappy life. But you've been able to really use it to share about God's goodness and glory and provision and kindness and healing. And you've been able to really steward the gifts that you've been given so, so well. So before we close out, just talk to the listeners and tell them where they can best find and connect with you.
I think they can best find and connect with me through your website. Perfect. And I mean, I have an Instagram. It's at Holly Joyce Murray. Murray spelled Murray.
But she is a joy. And you can always reach out to her on Instagram through DMs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I get some of the funniest reels from you. I'm like, yes, girl, that's it.
Humor. I love humor. If you can't tell, it's something that I think connects us all and helps us get through.
For sure. Well, Holly, I want to take a moment and just say, well done. Well done. Well done in being a mom and being a wife and being an encourager to not just me, but to so many other women. We often refer to you as a connector because that is 100% one of your gifts. I know that we didn't get to this part, but you've also set up some people to find their lifelong partners.
Yeah.
And then even like the fact that we're sitting in this beautiful room that was started as a vision by a friend of yours. Yeah. This is such an honor. And like I said, well done. But also I just want to encourage you to continue to lean into that and know that God is for you. He's not just for you to tell other people that he's for them, but God is actually for you. And he's got a plan and a purpose for you in the little mundane tasks that you do as a wife and as a mom, and also in the big, giant tasks that you've done in DDCC and for other clients, and every single word that you write and the way that he's crafted your mind to write in other people's voices and to be able to convince people to buy things through your copywriting, but also just in the gift of you being authentically you. That is more than enough for any of us to succeed who get the privilege of being around you, because you are you. And you have been so uniquely created to be so much, just so many different things. And it really is truly an honor. So thank you. Continue to shine that light and know that you, my friend, are created worthy.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to my episode of the Created Worthy podcast. My hope for you is that you are filled with the peace and the hope of God by listening to this. And remember, you've got this and God's got you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you, and if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.